Fear is something that has been present in every species since when species first really started to evolve as a means of survival. And as the human species started to evolve and become more intelligent and aware of its surroundings and more prepared for the world, we started using fear in literature as more of a way of entertainment and sort of a way also to like relate to a character that's on the page.
Yeah, the ghost stories that they told.
Yeah, and so fear was always a way to sort of teach lessons and relate to other people in ways that were previously not available.
Mm-hmm.
Fears have been something, as modern society has progressed, they have become they're still for survival, but they're also of things that were previously not thought of as to be true, and many people have actually become afraid of the fear of these things. But the basis of these fears has remained the same throughout time, and can be seen in literature going all the way back in time. And today we're going to be talking about Washington Irving and his use of fear in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, and how the basis of the fears in these pieces of literature can still be related to the basis of modern fears.
Like with climate change, people are afraid of the unknown and like fear change. They don't want to acknowledge that the world is dying and there's something that they could do, but they just won't do.
The idea that they could possibly be at fault for that. It's this unknown of like what could actually happen and what could have caused it. But even if the unknown becomes a little less unknown, the fear of change can prevent us from really accepting that unknown is now known.
Yeah.
And we can see this in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod. And after the Headless Horseman incident, at the very end of the book, it is revealed that Ichabod is actually living in New York, and he's made a name for himself. And
But the townswoman, they won't acknowledge that he's like alive and well. Like they still think that he died from the Headless Horseman because like the legend of it. Because they want to hold on to like a sense that like brings the town together. Because without the legend, there's nothing really that they could do, because it's just like it was known as the Terry Town because there's nothing that happened there, like Sleepy Hollow.
It's a very like dreary town, very boring. So having a legend like that sort of helped bring life to a town that no one really looked at, and it can be hard to let go of something once you believe it's true, especially if that's something you feel brings character to whatever it is that you are trying to represent or that you are holding on to. And then another thing with Sleepy Hollow is the fear of change and the fear of being different, especially when we see Ichabod come into the town. Many of the women sort of regard him as like this like figure that is only rivaled by like clergymen in the sense of knowledge, but many of the men are kind of like looking down upon him and just see the schooling as a waste of time and some of his methods as like a waste of time because he's not like them. He grew up in a larger city probably, and he has a different and a higher education than many of them, and some people can see this as sort of something that is negative. And we use fear kind of as a general term, even when we're not necessarily afraid of something. It's just the overall disliking of something.
Like Brahm, like how he played all the pranks in the schoolhouse, like turning the furniture topsy-turvy, making his dog bark, like when Ichabod like spoke and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people will either ignore when something is different or try to create countermeasures to completely do away with whatever is different. And we see this with Brahm, actually, at the end of the book, when it is sort of hinted to that he was possibly the one who was the supposed headless horseman at the end.
Yeah, he would laugh whenever the pumpkin was acknowledged.
Yeah, so it was kind of hinted to at the end of Sleepy Hollow that Brahm could have possibly been the one that tormented Ichabod into leaving town. And it's this overall thing of Ichabod was different, and he was trying to reach for the same thing that Brahm was. And Brahm
Katrina.
Katrina. So Brahm sort of saw this as like a challenge and something that was different. And in a sense, he was afraid that this thing, or Ichabod, would end up undoing some of the things that Brahm had tried to do with Katrina.
Yeah. And like the point where you made, like, people are like afraid of change, they don't want different. Like the same with gun control, like mass shootings right now. They're afraid of, like, people are afraid of dying, like in schools, like places that would be, well, dying in places that were once safe and like a safe haven for them, like, say, churches, movie theaters, concerts, schools, like all that. But then there's people, like, against having gun control because they think it's, like, the natural right, the Second Amendment. And, they don't want to recognize that by not having gun control on, like, say, like, background checks, like, on all that, they are causing children to die in, like, schools and all. But there has been only one full calendar week, the week of January 5th, 2014, since 2013, that was Sandy Hook. And, like, everyone's saying that's the last thing, like, no more children dead because of, like, guns. Like, 26 people died, 23 were children, and all that. But there has been so many mass shootings since that there had, and people just won't acknowledge that they can change it.
Yeah, there's sort of this fear of, like, being wrong as well, which we see with the women when they don't want to acknowledge that Ichabod might actually be alive. And we just sort of have this idea that if we are not right, then we have this idea that if we're not right, then obviously, like, nothing about us is right at that point. Like, if one thing gets messed up, then we as a whole person are messed up. And so there's this growing need to hang on to some of your beliefs in elder generations especially. And we can see this with in Rip Van Winkle. We can sort of see this with the townsfolk when Rip comes back, and it's during the midst or right after the Revolutionary War, and there's this, he comes back and they start asking him, like, what political party he is, and he announces, like, that he's for the king and everything like that, and they immediately start, like, going into an uproar and telling him he should leave because he's different, and bringing, like, the fear of difference in here. It's this idea that, like, something is wrong in the situation and something is different than you, and you don't agree with whatever it is, so instead of trying to figure out the situation, we lash out at things a lot. And we also can see this with gun violence, with this sort of hesitance to change something that has been the same for so long, in the fear that it will affect us negatively, not really thinking about how it will affect other people.
Yeah, and like how you said, how do people change, and so the very character of the people seem change. There was a busy, bustling, dispositions tone about it instead of the accustomed phlegm and drowsy tranquility. So they were cold towards each other instead of like all being like happy and friendly like how it was before the war. They had a fear in the unknown and about like what would happen, because it was during the time where like Britain was like attacking them, and they didn't know what would come out of the war, like the War of 1812. And that's the same with the war on terror of how it is right now. And there's like this immense Islamophobia because they don't know what's going to happen, because like on like September 11, 2001, like 9/11, it changed the outlook how Americans viewed Muslims. Because even though there are like 1 billion Muslims on Earth, only 10% are terrorists, everyone still has immense Islamophobia that like all Muslims are terrorists, everyone's gonna be shot at, like all the suicide bombs, like all that.
It's a lot of like overgeneralizing, and bringing back up Sleepy Hollow, we see this when Ichabod, or really the whole town, they kind of refuse to go down this one pathway that leads to the church, because they see that's the Headless Horseman's like territory. And the one man that ever dared to go down there, because it is a faster way to get back to town, he had an encounter with it. So ever since then, people have kind of a tendency to shy away from it, in a sense that it's overgeneralizing that any time you go down that road, you're obviously going to have an encounter. You're obviously something bad is going to happen. And this is something that we do a lot throughout history, and even today. Like, we overgeneralize things, and it leads to becoming afraid of the thing that we are overgeneralizing.
Like with Sleepy Hollow, they kind of had they didn't know what it was like outside of Sleepy Hollow, because there was like the written accounts, like people passing for like training and all, but there wasn't really. They didn't go outside the little bubble, so there was like still the fear of the unknown, like what would happen, and there's still like the yellow fever was around that time, and they still like they didn't know what would come of the future.
Yeah,